Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. On the screen, you can see me, Hróbjartur Árnason. I'm a university teacher at the University of Iceland. I teach adult education, and here, oh, there is Tryggvi, who I'm going to interview. Tryggvi Tyr. He's also at this institution. This webinar is part of a series of webinars organized by a group called Distance. It's a Nordic network with participants from all the Nordic countries, from and even from Åland and the Faroes and Greenland. So we're all represented in this group. And what we're interested in is how to use ICT to support adult learning. And we were really interested in getting Tryggvi to be with us here today, because he's been one of those leading a community of practice and a group of many communities of practice, helping supporting professional development of teachers in Iceland. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to interview him. I'm going to chat very informally with Tryggvi here today about communities of practice, and I really hope you will come in with questions and test out your microphones or write your questions in the chat so that we can have a bit of an interactive discussion here. So to begin with, I think we should go to the next screen, and I would like to know from you, do you know about communities of practice? Have you heard about it? Have you studied it? Or have you been participating in communities of practice? So you can see here the first question, do you have a lot of knowledge? And the other one is about your experience. So have you been leading a community of practice or participated in it? Or do you have no experience at all? So please put the click there so that we can just have a small idea about how much knowledge you have already. This will help Tryggvi answer the next question. So this is interesting. So we have a kind of this looks like the normal curve, doesn't it? Tryggvi, would you like to respond to this?
Nice
Yeah.
nice normal curves everywhere. I know that I'm one of the few that marked extensive. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I figured I should at least mark extensive since I'm supposed to be the person who is going to be informing us about all of this. Now, what really piques my interest in this is the people that say that they have no experience with communities of practice. I would challenge that assertion because communities of practice are in fact naturally occurring phenomena whenever groups of people get together. So I think that everyone has some experience with a community of practice. They might just not have known about it because it tends to be very informal. But we'll get more into that as our
Lovely.
discussion evolves
So
here.
we should go on, and I, I'd like for you, Tryggvi, to explain a bit to us. You know, what are communities of practice, and what are they good for?
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope people don't mind if I get just a little bit theoretical here, because I think that's perhaps one of the most significant things about the way that we're discussing communities of practice here today, that we're discussing it as a specific theory of how, when, and where people learn. And the theory of communities of practice it comes from Etienne Wenger, and he incidentally, along with Jean Lave, is also the author of the theory of situated learning, and the two are very, very much linked together. And somewhere I read that these theories, situated learning and communities of practice, are the most referenced theories in educational and academic literature about education over the past 20 years. And that really probably isn't very surprising, because what Wenger and Lave and his other colleagues managed to do is to formally describe what everyone already knew happens. That is, that people who do stuff together learn from each other, and they do so in various ways. And one of the very interesting things about, and it's very informal. I mean, basically, when we're talking about situated learning and communities of practice, we might just be talking about the group that gathers around the coffee maker at the office. That essentially, if people are standing around the coffee machine at the office and they're actually communicating about the stuff they do, then they are functioning as a community of practice in a certain sense. And like I say, it's very informal. And when you start theorizing about the informal, there's always the danger that you ruin it by formalizing the informal. And but the way that Wenger and his colleagues have theorized about communities of practice and situated learning, that it holds up. Even it doesn't overly formalize what we're talking about, but at the same time, it provides us with a certain type of roadmap to do things with, to where we can actually, like I say, communities of practice, I think we have to see them as just naturally occurring phenomena. And we might we might say that we're trying to form a community of practice, when essentially, if we're going to be very specific, I think that what we're trying to do is trying to help an already occurring community of practice to be more effective, because communities of practice just occur on their own. And Wenger's theory, like I say, because it's a constantly evolving theory that has kept up with changes within societies, within workplaces, that it provides us with a relatively good roadmap for working with naturally occurring communities of practice to help them to become more effective.
Yeah.
Now, I might be jumping the gun getting into the next question, but I'll try to stick to this first question first. What is it good for? What are communities of practice good for? Firstly, there is that they are naturally occurring phenomena, so they're already happening. Okay, but secondly is that, and this is probably one of the biggest benefits of communities of practice, is that the learning that occurs in communities of practice is always in context. It's always in a relevant context, because it is people that work together or that share common interests that are exchanging their ideas in an environment that is usually directly connected to what they're learning about. And this is this is a very effective means of transferring knowledge and know-how and experiences between individuals within certain environments, but it also is a very effective means of expanding on existing knowledge, because people get together and they start coming at things from each from their own direction, and they say, well, I've always done this way, and someone comes along and says, well, I tried to do it slightly differently and it worked out better for me. And so everyone rushes off and tries this new method, and then they gather around the coffee maker again, and this becomes common knowledge and starts to be developed even further. And so it's, like I say, it's not just about learning from each other, but it's actually developing new and innovative ideas that can be implemented very quickly.
So it's about
very quickly.
But can you organize this? Can you Alistair repeated what Björk thought? I thought we could organize freedom, and you have this theory from Wenger and Lave, so can you organize what's going on? Can you help people make some space where they meet anyway, like the coffee machine? Can you make it more conducive to learning?
Yeah, well, that's exactly, and that's what I was talking about, that the theory is so helpful, and so helpful as a roadmap, because it does provide us with various tools, and actually one of Wenger and his colleagues' more recent books, Digital Habitats, it's a handbook of how to really make communities of practice function fairly effectively using online tools, and really, as we'll get into that, in terms of the work that we've been doing with the Education Plaza and the Samspel initiative that we'll talk about in a little while here, that it's been our Bible, it's been our roadmap, and we use it as a handbook, and there we should be doing this, we should be doing this. But we always get that question of, well, can we form a community of practice? And I think you can. And I would say that in a sense that's exactly what we did with Samspel. But the way you do it, I think, in the effective way to do it, and we'll get probably more into why that's the case, is that you provide an environment and incentives for the individuals concerned to do it themselves. So when we're talking about using the theory of communities of practice to construct effective learning environments, then it's really more about how we support the individuals involved, building platforms where the individuals who are most effective, and there are various levels of effectiveness that are most effective, that they have a platform where they can actually reach out to the broader community. So it's really more about tweaking various elements that help the self-organizing community of practice. But I think, I think we cannot go and say, today we're going to form a community of practice. You will take on that role, you will take on that role, you will take on that role.
Okay.
That's not how it works, because the roles within communities of practice, they emerge from the context. And if you start pointing to people and assigning roles, then you might actually end up putting someone into a role that they're not very effective in.
Okay.
And that would
let's stop here for a minute. Does anybody have a question about this, about the background? Does anybody want to write, or if you would like to take the microphone, just raise your hand. You can see up there's a little man. You can click on it and raise your hand, and then I'll give you the microphone, or Alistair will. Or write your question here in the chat. Do you have a question or a comment about general? We'll get into specifics in a few seconds. Or have we shut you down? Seems like it. Waiting for, let's see if Esther has got a question. She stopped. Oh well. Okay. We'll go on. well, one of the reasons we asked you to wanted to talk to you is because of the work you've been leading or participating in with what we call educational plazas, and then the specific initiative called Samspil. So let's go there now, and maybe we have these educational plazas. Could you tell us a bit about them, and
Yep.
did you choose a model of communities of practice, or did that just evolve? Do they? Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
did it choose us? Well, in fact, just to answer the question immediately, that so we have been working with the sort of the communities of practice framework for quite some time. And really it started with a website that was constructed here within the School of Education, which is called the Language Learning Plaza. And on the one of the photos here, you can see the picture of 5 people here. This is actually sort of the leadership team for the Samspil initiative, and each of these people are project managers for various plazas. And the one wearing the teal sweater, Toppa, dark hair, she is the manager of the Language Learning Plaza, and she had launched. Basically what it was a website which was to function sort of as a meeting point for people involved with any kind of language instruction. And so it's mother tongue, it's second language, it's third language, it's whatever. And this project was very effective and really raised a lot of attention. And so following their initial successes, then 2 more plazas were formed. One was the plaza for natural science teachers, and one for special education teachers. And so at this point we had these 3 plazas, and they were all working sort of from a communities of practice perspective and looking at how specifically we use networking technology to support.
Just let me stop you here. Just when you say a plaza, what are you talking about?
So that's what I'm getting into. So what we call a plaza is, and many people will, they get a little confused and they say, oh, so the plaza is the community of practice. But the plaza is never the community of practice. The plaza is only, it's a digital environment meant to support the community of practice. The community of practice is always just the individuals that participate, but they use various tools to enhance their participation. And what these plazas were doing was very intentionally introducing a range of tools to the participants in the communities of practice in order to sort of make their collaboration and their mutual learning more effective. And so basically the project managers became what Wenger and his colleagues would refer to as tech stewards. So they were trying to support the community of practice, which is the individuals that are involved, by choosing specific digital tools that could help them to achieve their goals. And so at this point, there were 3 of these plazas, and it was decided that it would be helpful to have maybe sort of one overarching framework to tie these individual plazas together amongst themselves. They already were cooperating a lot together. And to link it better into the School of Education and into the educational environment. And so that's where the Education Plaza comes, and that's the project that I manage. So the Education Plaza, that we don't maybe, I wouldn't say we deal specifically with any particular community of practice, but rather we are trying to link together different communities of practice to share knowledge about how to use technology effectively to enhance their collaborations, introduce new methods of collaboration, gather data, do research about how people actually collaborate, and various things like that. So we're sort of more of a support organization. And then, of course, as well, because we are sort of the link between the academic fields and practitioners that are involved in these communities of practice, that is sort of feeding new knowledge that comes out of research into the communities of practice, and also sort of polling these communities of practice to see what are the knowledge needs that we can help to address.
I'm just wondering, can you connect to this? Let's see if in the, maybe you could use the chat. Do you, who are listening to us now, do you?
I will.
Would you have answered the question? Have you participated in a community of practice? Would you answer it differently? Do you have any experience which say, yes, of course I'm part of a community of practice? Could we get you to just pop in one or two thoughts, or yes, do you have any kind of experience which can relate to this?
Anna Sofia asked actually an interesting question, and this is something that we'll get into more as we talk about some of the tools that we use. Asking whether a Facebook group of teachers would be seen as a plaza. And a Facebook group of teachers is an indication to us in regards to the Education Plaza and the other plazas. A Facebook group of teachers is an indication that there is a community of practice either forming or already formed. And in fact, when we try to keep our eyes out for communities of practice that we see forming, and when we see that there is a community of practice forming somewhere, we'll invite them to participate in some of the work that we're doing. And usually what we look for first, before anything else, is a Facebook group. And if we find a Facebook group focused on specific topics, and there are people involved in education in that Facebook group, and they're actively sharing their knowledge and experiences, then that's an indication that, oh, there is a community of practice that could benefit from what we have learned through our work. And we'll invite them, like I say, to participate with us. Usually that involves then creating a new plaza. And like I say, we started with those 3 plazas. We're up to, I think, 8 or 9 now. So we're always identifying new groups, and we'll invite them to participate, and then we'll start sharing our knowledge about how you use technologies to effectively support a community of practice.
Let's see. Some people are typing, but we don't see anything going on. So maybe we should move on, and you should. And I'd like you to tell us a bit about Samspil. So what was that, and
Yes.
and how successful was it, and how did the idea? How did the yeah? Let's start. You tell us about Samspil, and we'll go further from there.
Yeah. Well, there are actually there's actually at least one person I know amongst the participants who was a participant in the Samspel initiative. So maybe they can pipe in if they'd like. But Samspel was a project that it was an opportunity that presented itself, shall we say. I'm going to switch to the slides here on some of the Samspel stuff here. So basically what happened was that there was a request for bids for that the Research Center of Iceland advertised to develop training in the use of information and communication technologies in teaching and learning for Icelandic teachers. And what they were specifically looking for was what we might call sort of bang for the buck initiatives, so that we could deliver effective training to the most people at the lowest cost. And so we decided, myself and the managers of some of the other plazas, that we would develop an initiative on the basis of what we had been doing. So, you know, using communities of practice, using that approach to deliver online learning. And we developed this initiative called Samspel, which I would say, so I've sort of chosen to say that it's not entirely a community of practice approach, but it's sort of a hybrid of communities of practice and massive online open courses, so MOOCs. And we sort of tried to pick the best out of both of those approaches to develop a course of training that went over an entire year and was almost but not entirely online, and using the social media that people were already using for the most part. We did, of course, introduce some social media, but not developing our own type of system, not setting up a course in some far reaches of the internet that required a special login and that sort of thing, but basically reaching out to the people where we already knew they were for the most part, and helping them to make this a more effective learning community by both introducing methods and specific knowledge about technologies and that sort of thing. So that's basically how the project started, and we got the bid, and so we launched it in March of last year.
Yeah. And tell us, what did you do?
Well, I'm getting to that. So basically the idea was that we would start out with face-to-face learning and just one face-to-face session, but a full day face-to-face session. And we would deliver this in various parts of the country. And after that, following that one session, everything would be online. And so what we were trying to do was to make sure, and there were sort of basically three ideas behind that initial face-to-face session. One, that people got a sense of who else was with them in this, and to build that sort of sense of community. Two was to make sure that everyone involved knew how to use the social media that we would be using for the rest of the course. And three, to just provide very practical new knowledge about the use of technology, so that it came away from this initial session feeling that, you know, wow, I've already learned something. Now I'm going to go and learn a bunch more. Sort of drum up excitement. And following this initial session, there was, so this is, in this slide that I have here, this is the basic setup of the Samspel, the structure of the Samspel course. And so it starts in this orange box, that this was the initial face-to-face setting, and it was taught in each of those boxes is one municipality or city here in Iceland. And so that was a 5-hour full day session. After that, there were 3 basic or essential components that were delivered on a monthly basis. So we had a monthly theme, so each month we would have a different theme, and those themes would be addressed in 2 webinars, so 2 online webinars, short instructional videos that were constructed and put onto the project website, which I will share for you here in a moment, share with you, and then participation and activity within online communities. And there we're talking about the Facebook groups, Twitter chat, writing on weblogs, and that sort of thing. So that was the essential structure of the whole thing. 1 face-to-face session, and then everything online after that. Now, the community of practice part comes in sort of in the webinars, the short instructional videos, and the online communities. Because for the webinars, for example, we would find the people we found had the most relevant knowledge to deliver these webinars. And in many cases, those were participants in the Samspel initiative itself. So it was people.
So participants were teaching each other.
And yes, through these webinars. And also the short instructional videos, almost all of those were created by participants. And then, of course, in the online communities, there it was, of course, very much the leadership team sort of poking and prodding and trying to, encourage people to engage in conversation and dialogue and share various things, but it was the participants themselves.
They were paying, weren't they?
Well, this was heavily subsidized, shall we say. It was because we got this grant to develop it. So the cost of the course was only 5,000 Icelandic crowns per participant for an entire year.
That's not much.
So that's
very little.
That's
and I was just wondering if, how did they feel about becoming teachers in a course where they were kind of paying for? Was that okay? Okay, they got paid for it. I see.
Yes, they got paid for it, and I mean, for instance, right now we're looking at possible models for doing this again and to carrying this over. And within that is that yes, we pay for the content, and you get paid whether you're a participant or an external expert. You get paid the same. And that's just figured into the cost. So they did get paid for that. Also, within each of these areas, these regions where we had the face-to-face sessions, we had a local representative, and so they both helped us to organize the face-to-face session, but they also sort of became our representatives going forward for the rest of the year, and we got them to help us to develop brief initiatives within each local region outside, which were basically face-to-face.
So they would organize their own face-to-face activities outside, apart from the ones where you were present.
Yes. Yeah, and mostly this was in the form of educamps, And this is an EduCamp. This is a method that we have used a lot because it's sort of, if people aren't familiar with EduCamps, I'll write the word here into the window here, that this is basically, it's a form of unconference. So it's a very informal gathering where people are encouraged to share their own knowledge and experience. That and basically what we're trying to do is to make it not like a stuffy old conference where someone stands at a podium and talks at everyone. And so at a EduCamp, basically you have a number of stations within, let's say we have one big meeting hall, and you set up several stations, and then you invite participants to man one station for a specific amount of time, just to share what they have been doing, that sort of knowledge that they have gathered through their own teaching practice. And so they'll go to one station, you get all your stations manned, and then the rest of the participants that are there to basically learn, they can go from station to station and just have a discussion with whoever is presenting what, you know, the knowledge that they have acquired. And then after a while, we'll say, okay, time's up, switch, get a new group. And so it's, like I say, it's very informal, it's very relaxed, and people have taken very well to it. And so now we're hearing about EduCamps being held all over Iceland, and much of that started when we were in the had the Samspil initiative going, and we're encouraging our local representatives to find ways to bring their local community together in a face-to-face setting. Because like I say, the community of practice, it's always the individuals involved. It's not the technology, it's not the support structures. And even if you're trying to do a lot of stuff online, that those types of face-to-face meetings.
Okay, so you had face-to-face, big face-to-face meetings to start off, and then every now and then they would even spontaneously create their own EduCamps. But you know, online, face-to-face, how important was meeting face-to-face for creating the community of practice?
I think it was really very important, and and in the feedback that we got from participants, many of them said that they would have liked to have more opportunities for face-to-face meetings, and so, you know, I think we could have done more of that. But the one thing is that for the, you know, sort of the, what do we say, the limitations that we were working within, that the most costly part of something like this are the face-to-face meetings. You know, that involves space, you know, getting food for everyone and all of that kind of stuff. So that becomes the most costly. And since we were trying to do this for the least amount of money, that we were certainly limited in the number of face-to-face sessions that we could provide people with. And if we were to do this again, I would probably try to do more face-to-face sessions, or ideally encourage participants to arrange more opportunities for face-to-face meetings themselves. Because I think that is something that our participants could have been doing in their own schools, in their own municipalities, on their own, and it probably would have been more cost-effective for them to do it than
There's
for
an
us
interesting question here. Let's take it. Jonina asked, could an EduCamp work, for example, within student groups? Talking about how to study, how to be university students. Could be like sharing of knowledge and experience. Could you see that happening at a university?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Jonina, I would recommend that you get in touch with our fellow Minnesota Mafia person, Solveig Jakobsdottir, because so one of the professors here at the School of Education, that she has been doing EduCamps with her own students that are involved in the courses that she teaches here at the university. And she says, and I've attended some of those EduCamps, and it goes very well. Maybe one of the limitations is that the students perceive it as an assignment. So it's something that they are required to do for a grade and that sort of thing. So it doesn't quite have the openness of an EduCamp that is organized by teachers just wanting to, do their own thing. But certainly it's a method that can be used with students and can be very effective with students. Yeah. And many examples of that being done.
Maybe such when you want to get people involved voluntarily, it depends. It's important who organizes it. So if the student union would organize something like what Jonin is suggesting, that might be more productive than if the university itself were doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And certainly, sort of takes us to another part of the in terms of communities of practice in general, and the Samspel initiative, and that is, who is the leader, who runs things, who controls stuff. And like I say, in communities of practice, one of the important things to understand about the theory of communities of practice is that even though it is addressing learning that occurs in groups, that it is essentially a theory about identity. And the focus of the theory of communities of practice is to help us identify what certain individuals do within the community to support learning. And there are certain types of roles that tend to emerge in communities of practice. There are leadership roles. And when you get into online learning communities, that there are what we call the tech stewards, the people who introduce new technologies to the community and say, hey, we should be using YouTube to create videos, and I'll show you all how to do this. And I'm sure that anyone who has worked in a school recognizes this, that there's someone within the school that isn't necessarily the computer person, but is the go-to person for anything that has to do with technology. And they're just a person that is very interested in technology. They follow technological developments. So they emerge within the community as the natural tech steward. And so that's really what the focus of communities of practice as a theory is who does what and what impact do they have. And so when we think of this question of leadership, so who is the person who everyone looks to within the community of practice for, what do we do next? What happens next? And one of the things that we very much wanted to do within the Samspel initiative was that the leadership would be assumed by other participants. And so to try to make that work, it was kind of important for us who were coordinating this project to just be part of the community, and not to try to distinguish ourselves as the teachers or anything like that, but just equal members of the community. And I thought we had done that quite successfully until we started gathering feedback from our participants, and everyone said, no, you guys were the teachers. You guys were always the teachers. And I was like, oh, failure. But I think nonetheless that to a certain extent, and certainly from what we see of how this has developed after the project, because that's actually the interesting thing that we get into. that even though the Samspel initiative has completed, that this is still going on, that this community that developed within the initiative is still very active. And they are active on Facebook. People are sharing YouTube videos. People are participating in Twitter chats. And so in that sense, it worked out very well. And even though we have, to a certain extent, withdrawn, but still remain active just as, civilian participants, that the community, because we focused on identifying, okay, who are the people who will lead this and take this further? And how can we, sort of put them onto a pedestal and make them more effective? For instance, by having them lead webinars and this sort of thing, that has worked out quite well. And those people are still leading the community, and it's taken on a life of its own. And so we still hear about people organizing EduCamps in their local contexts, and people are doing things online, and so in that sense, things worked out excellent.
There's been a sort of discussion going on here in the chat, and I think Carol started talking about what's it called? Teachers do not want to write about their experience, write down their thoughts and experience on social media, but would rather talk. So this is kind of, I think this is, how what did you experience? Were people willing to use Facebook or Twitter to share experience or ask questions? And can you initiate them? Can you drag them so that they can become more active? This touches on what Nana was talking about as well, legitimate peripheral participation, lurking. Can you give us some thoughts about that?
Yep. Absolutely. Well, yes, people like to talk together, but if they have something to share and they have the opportunity to share it, then most of them do like to share it. And so part of what we were trying to do was to get the participants to generate content, to make their own content, to be using media that creates an artifact. And I haven't mentioned artifacts, but it's a very important component of the communities of practice. Communities of practice for sustainability, they have to create something. A community of practice that isn't creating something tends to sort of fall apart. So part of the initial face-to-face session was to teach people to use technology to make stuff, and to make stuff that they could share with other teachers. Assignments, videos, various other things, and we got them to start writing their own blogs on sort of some of their own experiences, and to share that. And as long as they had that kind of stuff to share, then they did so.
Okay, so you're not saying they have to create stuff together, but the individuals are creating stuff and sharing it and getting
But then it's the question of what becomes the artifact that is created collaboratively. And for instance, a data bank of resources is a very good artifact, right? And so I'm going to put here into the window the link to
this is
project website.
You should use the other chat on the left.
Oh, okay. And like I say, this is the project website, and this is basically one of the artifacts, and probably the largest of the artifacts that came out of the Samspel initiative. And so this is a website where all recordings of all of the webinars are um, openly accessible. All of the short instructional videos are openly accessible, and there are links to various online groups where people can engage in discussions with other teachers. So that's an artifact that is really constructed from all of these things that are
Okay.
individually created. But in the end, the artifact is very
Uh-huh.
collaboratively created.
We're getting close to the end, and I really would like to.
Mm-hmm.
We've been trying to get. We've had some questions for from the participants. Alistair, could you give everybody microphone rights? So if somebody wants to take up the microphone and ask a question, they just can. And otherwise, are there questions which you would like us to address before we finish? So anybody write or take the microphone and ask a question. The microphone is right above my head here, a white picture of a microphone, and you turn it on by clicking on there, and then it's green. Then you can talk if you want. So you all have microphone rights.
While people are typing their questions or thinking about questions, I want to mention one very important component of the Samspel initiative, which is sort of illustrated in this slide that I've put up. Now, the goal here was to provide training in the use of information and communication technologies. And we know that within the school community in Iceland, we had all sorts of different levels of knowledge and experience. That because we were trying to enable a community of practice, that one of the important things for us was that we had to reach not only those that were very much in need of training, but we also had to reach the people who already had knowledge, who were already quite effective in their use of information communication technologies, because they're very important for the community. I can see there's a
Turil
question. We'll take the
I
question and
think
then
wants
I'll
to take the
finish.
microphone. Turil, you raised your hand. You can turn on your microphone.
I have done. I guess often the COPs are global, with people from many different countries. Have you examples that the national ones could function well? I mean, do you have experience of the national and the international COPs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the communities of practice that we've worked with are almost all entirely national. These are just Icelandic teachers who work in Iceland and are learning from other Icelanders. But we've always encouraged them to use the opportunities that they have with international communities, with international web chats and international webinars, to pursue those as well. And many of them do. Many of them do. And so in the framework sort of the communities of practice, that actually becomes what Wenger and his colleagues call a border, and a border crossing. So those people who are participating in those international events, they're transferring knowledge from those international contexts to the national context. And we've actually seen a lot of our participants doing that very effectively.
Can you take up the discussion about lurkers? They've been talking a bit about lurkers and trust, and many lurkers kind of reducing the trust within the group, especially online.
Mm-hmm. Well, lurkers they're very important in the context of COPs. And for one thing, that the lurkers are often lurkers, according to Wenger, lurkers hang out on what's called the border where there's that legitimate peripheral participation. And so lurkers tend to hang out in those regions where different communities of practice run into each other. And so you have people who are not actively participating in one place, but they're listening, right? And they are actively participating in another place. So they're transferring knowledge between COPs, and they're very important in that sense. Now, we all know that the most effective learning, I think, we are in education, we know that the most effective learning occurs when people are active and when people are reflective, when they're sharing their own knowledge, bouncing their own knowledge off others. But still, sitting at the sidelines and listening and not actually talking, they're still learning. They're maybe not learning as effectively as others, but they're still learning. And that's just one of the things that we had to recognize, that there are lurkers. We would never get everyone to participate in conversations, but we had various means of encouraging them to participate. And much of that actually comes out of the Twitter chats that we've organized. That we organize bi-weekly Twitter chats under a specific hashtag, and it's all Icelandic, and it's not directly related to the Samspil initiative, but it's a collaboration between Education Plaza and other individuals. But it was something that we encouraged the participants in the Samspil initiative to participate in. And we've been gathering a lot of data from those Twitter chats and doing various network analyses and this sort of thing to actually look at how the discussions evolve and how we can sort of poke and prod to have an impact on the discussion. So we've actually developed various ways of encouraging people to open up and be active in discussions. And much of that I would describe as creating opportunities where people can talk, giving them something to talk about.
Okay,
and a reason
I think we have to stop here, Tryggvi. Thank you very much. It's been very informative and very interesting, and I can see from the chat that many people are interested in what you what you were saying, and you seem to catch on. So we have a few questions we'd like you to answer the participants. One, was the technology okay? And one, did you like what you heard today? So please give us a click here on what you how you think this was. And I would like to tell you about another webinar very soon on virtual mobility, internationalization at home, which we have on the 29th of September at 3 o'clock CET. So that's a bit earlier in Iceland and Greenland and later in Finland. So we are continuing our webinars on the 29th, and maybe we should, I'm not sure how many people have voted, but I think we should just show what you think. How did you like this today? So can you, I expect you can see now there were no technical problems and people are relatively happy with what. Thank you very much for your reactions, and if you want to write something, please do in the chat. So Tryggvi, thank you for participating and chatting with us, and it was really nice having you all with us from all over Scandinavia and the Nordic region. So hope to see some of you later at a later webinar with distance. We will send all of the people who were registered a link, and all our stuff is also on the NVL site, where so you should be able to find it there at nvl.org/distance. That's us. So all of you, thanks for being with us, and hope to see you